Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I'm glad that you decided to join me on this early edition, at least if you're watching the live stream. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm sure you're doing whatever you're doing, out mowing the lawn, enjoying a cold beverage, doing whatever you are out by the pool. That's where I wish I was right now, at least before the Bees game started. But I'm loyal to all my listeners that are out there. Want to make sure that you all get a good show in tonight. That's why I moved it up to 6 o'clock so that we could all enjoy the Bruins game, which starts at 7:30 tonight as they try to stave off elimination and try to beat the Islanders and bring this series back to Boston on Friday night. So hopefully the Bruins are able to keep this thing alive and keep this going deep into the summer as things start to heat up. And I know a lot of you out there were enjoying that warm weather. Was able to go in the pool this weekend and enjoy a few adult beverages, and it was a pretty fun experience. So I was sweating it out this weekend, which I pretty much will be doing tonight. Different kind of sweating it out, hoping the Bruins can pull this one out of their ass. As things did not go well in game 5 of this series, as they ended up dropping the game 5-4 on home ice to the Islanders. So things didn't go as planned, as we'll get right out of the box. As you just mentioned, the Bruins are now trailing the series 3-2 to the Islanders. So tonight is do or die. They cannot lose, or else the season will be over, and the Islanders will be moving on to facing the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are the defending Stanley Cup champions. So the Bruins looking to keep the series alive, force a game 6, so that they can go home and hopefully have a chance to play those Tampa Bay Lightning, who they have not had a lot of success in. But we won't focus too heavily on the Lightning here tonight, as it's go win or go home for the Bruins. So don't want to overdo it here for the Bruins. Or I should say, focusing on the Lightning and focus more on the Bruins versus the Islanders. And if you are paying attention over this last couple days, Bruce Cassidy was fined $25,000 for his comments on the officiating in this series, specifically game 5 against the Islanders, as he did call them the New York Saints, saying that they didn't get any calls, which we know that's not entirely true, but they are one of the least penalized teams in the NHL. So it's not a far-fetched thing for him to be out there criticizing them, the disparity in not the goaltending, but the disparity in the penalty calls that have just been ridiculous in this series. It just feels like a landslide. We'll get into that here in a second. But as far as the rest of the series is gone, Tuukka Rask, I'm sure if you've been paying attention, has been dealing with some injuries over the regular season, and then that cropped up in game 5 as he had to be pulled. So that wasn't a great look for Tuukka, and they had to put the University of Maine product, Jeremy Swayman, in to finish out that game. Did give up 1 goal and only faced 4 more shots in that period, as it was pretty much all Bruins in the third. But Tuukka, that was the speculation over the last couple of days, is if he would play or not. And it officially this morning, somewhere in that 11 o'clock hour, but time really isn't a big factor there. Tuukka is now being placed in as the starting goaltender for the Boston Bruins. So that mystery has been solved, whether it was going to be Tuukka or Swayman. So now the Bruins will try to rely on a banged-up Tuukka to try to steal them game 6 on the road in Nassau County Coliseum out on Long Island. And the Boston Red Sox swept the New York Yankees over the weekend, so they were able to faced the Yankees the first time. This was the first time in 2 months that they faced the Yankees, first time all year to be exact. And they had a long losing streak against the Yankees over this last couple of years where they haven't had great teams. Speaking about the Red Sox, it's been some pretty bad Red Sox teams as of lately since winning the World Series. Just gone downhill. As we all know, things have straightened out and they're back on top. They've fallen behind Tampa Bay in the division, but they looked like themselves again against the Yankees, coming up with a few big clutch hits from Marwin Gonzalez. And even Bobby Dahlbeck chipped in with a gigantic home run. Rafael Devers' absolute moonshot into the upper deck at Yankee Stadium. So it was a pretty good series overall for the Red Sox. Now they also did sweep the Marlins, not quasi sweep, but it was a delayed sweep is really what it was, because last weekend on Memorial Day weekend, or the weekend before, I should say, they played in pretty crappy conditions. I wouldn't say torrential downpours, but it was coming down really hard against the Sox and the Marlins. So they weren't able to play that game on Sunday. So they had to postpone it to mutual off day, which just happened to be this last Monday. The Red Sox did end up beating the Marlins 5-3, finishing off that not unnatural, but unusual sweep, delayed sweep. So now they swept two teams back to back technically, and now they have to face the Houston Astros again. So we'll see how the rest of this week goes. They already dropped game 1, but if they can get better pitching than they did the last time they faced the Astros, get better timely hitting, then things should even out, because you want to see them compete against those really good teams, which so far it's been a pretty good assortment of how things have gone against those really competitive teams. The Astros are the one really good team that they've struggled with early on here in the season. We'll get into that a little bit later on. And one piece of breaking news, or semi-breaking news, that happened about an hour ago, where Kemba Walker and the Boston Celtics, mainly Kemba, is upset with the situation as he's not happy with the front office. Now, a note there is that he wasn't happy with how Danny Ainge was handling the situation in Boston before he was stepping down. Really, I would probably say fired is really what happened, but you know how that goes in this modern day world. It's the mutually parting ways, mutually agreeing to move on. It's what is really the modern day way that things go with not just sports, but all walks of life, is how you don't get fired anymore unless you did something egregious. Then they say your ass is fired. So in this case, it was a mutual agreement to part ways with Danny Ainge. But what's happening with Kemba Walker is that he is not happy with the direction that the team has decided to go with Kemba, which I can't really blame the team. I'm more on the Celtics side in this situation, not because Kemba's not a good shooter, not because he's not a good player, just because he has been injured over the last 2 seasons since he's been with the Celtics. And you kind of knew that was the situation. That was how it was down in Charlotte over the last 8 years before he came to Boston. So you knew what you were in for. But he's still a good player. He's not a Kyrie Irving who he was brought in here to replace. Now, the front office isn't going to say that. They're going to tell you that Kyrie's a one of a generation player, blah, blah, blah. They're going to say all those things. But you know that's why they brought him in here. And they also brought him in here to be a locker room presence. And that was one of the things that Kemba was kind of upset about here as the quote came out, as the story came out this afternoon, that he wanted to be that veteran presence in the locker room for Jason Tatum, for Jaylen Brown, for the young guys on this team, even if he wasn't going to be at 100%. Now, if you're a Celtics fan, it's been frustrating with Kemba because he'll put up some really good games when he's out there on the court and when he is I'm not going to say 100% right, because with the knee injury, it's never going to be back to 100% for Kemba. But when he's 85%, 90%, what he can be, he's out there and putting up 20, 25. He'll put up some 35, even some 40-point games occasionally, but he's a very steady 20 to 25-point scorer a night. And now, obviously, in this day and age of the NBA, the 20-point game is more like a set, what you probably would have looked back in the late 90s, early 2000s, of a 15 to 17-point game, point per game a night in the NBA. But still, nonetheless, you still need those guys on this team if you're going to be the third or fourth scorer, which that's what the Celtics are struggling with, getting more depth just beyond Tatum and Jaylen Brown, so that they have more to build around, and you're not just a one-man, two-man show and, hey, what's going on down below in the rest of the roster? So we'll see how that goes for the Celtics, if they're able to find a trade partner, which it's going to be hard with his medical condition and his whole situation and how that's played out over the last couple of years. It really hasn't been an ideal situation for the Celtics or Kemba altogether. But if they can find somebody that's at least willing to eat some of the contract, then it'll be interesting to say the least what they get back for him. Hopefully they can find something decent. Hopefully they don't have to use some of their other trade chips, which outside of Jaylen Brown, there's not a lot. It's Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, because you're not going to trade Jason Tatum. So it'll be interesting. So that was something that came across the board with Kemba being upset, wanted to be traded out of Boston now. So it's going to be an interesting offseason, to say the least. Now, as that moves on, as we get past the NBA Finals later in June, when we know how things are going to work out, we'll follow the offseason. We'll keep you up to date. We'll let you know what's going on. But we'll get to the smorgasbord, or the main entree tonight, in the Boston Bruins, as basically kind of a quasi pregame show with how we're starting the show tonight. As you mentioned, the Boston Bruins are trying to stave off elimination, as they are now down 3-2 to the New York Islanders. And it was a rough Game 5 for the Bruins. At least it didn't start out that way, to be honest. They came out guns a-blazing in that first period. Now, David Pastrnak, who missed an absolute golden opportunity in Game 4 on the road, you couldn't draw a better picture. You couldn't come up with a better situation for David Pastrnak to score a goal. Hell, I have never played organized hockey. I played a little bit of street, a little bit of hockey and gym, and just fooling around, that type of situation. So I'm basically, what I'm saying is, I am not even a good amateur. I am the furthest thing away from being a professional hockey player. And that was a situation that Pastrnak, where I could have scored on that. That was literally just roll the puck into the goal. It's basically as far away from I am to this microphone right now. At least that's what it looked like. I know semantics there, but my point is, that was the easiest goal that Pastrnak has probably had in his entire life, and he whiffed it. Now, I know the puck was rolling, and it was a tough situation for him to settle that down. But come on, that was painful to watch. Very painful. And of course, so what does he do coming out in Game 5 at home? The very first shot that he takes is an absolute cannon, and it almost rips the back of the goal net out. It was hit that hard. First shot, 1 goal, Bruins up 1-0. Then the Bruins went on to control the next 11 minutes of that period, 12 minutes. They dominated that first period. And it felt like it should have been a 2-0, 3-0 lead at the end of the first period. So what happens? Brad Marchand pulls a Pastrnak from game 4. The net wasn't as wide open. So it wasn't as egregious a miss, but still it was pretty awful to see that miss that Pastrnak, that Marchand had. When Varlamov was off to his right-hand side, Bergeron, in this case, Marchand, everybody on that top line has had an opportunity to score in that first period. So I'm rolling that Rolodex in my brain here. That's what's going on here. Just rewatching that game. But basically, my point is what happened is Marchand had an opportunity on the left-hand side, not once, but twice in a matter of 3 to 5 seconds, where he had a wide open net that he was able to shoot into, where he probably had about a 2 to 3 foot opening where it just would have been golden opportunity to take a 2-0 lead. And I just could not believe it. I was beside myself that did not go in on either opportunity. And I'm not saying that would have been a game over, game closing goal. It would have been 8 minutes into the first period. So you're still talking roughly about 48 minutes, 50 some odd minutes, 52 minutes. Sorry, math was my strong suit. Left in the game. So obviously you still have a ton of time that you have to kill in that game. You're not just going to walk out. But still, just think about the situation that would have put the Bruins in. You would have been up 2-0 on an Islanders team that a lot of people, including myself, after the first couple of games, looked like the Bruins had outclassed them, that it looked like you were next to Tampa Bay, you were the best team in the East. And you could throw Carolina in there as well. But my point being is that the Bruins looked really strong. And of course, the Islanders, you saw a little bit more of what you saw in the regular season, which worried me before the series, because I'll be honest, I was kind of flip-flopping after the first couple games of the series. I was like, well, maybe I really don't have to fear the Islanders as much as I did, even though I called for a 7-game series, which this looks like what direction we're going in. Because I do think the Bruins will end up winning tonight. We'll get a little bit more on that here in just a moment. But still, I thought this Islanders team was deep in all 4 lines. I just was a little shell-shocked from what I saw in the regular season, so I thought that would roll over. But then again, I kind of flip-flopped how I saw this team, especially with just how talented that first line is for the Bruins, and that second line for the Bruins is equal to that first line of what, at least in my opinion, of what the Islanders have. So they have 2 really good lines. It's the major drop-off in the third and fourth lines for the Bruins. So you don't have the same depth that the Islanders do, because I'm not saying the third and fourth line for the Islanders is going to be anybody's second line or anything like that, or let alone a first line. So it's not in that situation, but still they have depth. It kind of reminds me of what the Patriots were in the early 2000s before they got Edelman and Gronk and Brady reliant, before they didn't have all that much depth in that wide receiving core. And then if you look at it, it was build up depth in the running back core, build up depth in the linebacker and front seven. We can go on and on. I'm not going to get into that because we're going to get into the Bruins. But my point being is it just reminds me of what the Patriots were early on in their run before they really all became superstars, before Seymour was a superstar, before Brady became the GOAT, before Belichick was the GOAT. It was, you're going to have a lot of good talent. You're going to have some Pro Bowlers. You're going to have some, maybe an All-Pro in there, but you're not going to have the Hall of Famers, the stud superstars. At least that's what we thought back in 2001, 2003, before, obviously, Brady became the GOAT, before everything has become what it is, and the Patriots became arguably the best dynasty and have had the best tight end of all time, the best receiver. And I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Randy Moss, who was probably the second best receiver of all time. But then you have the greatest quarterback of all time, the greatest coach. So before all that morphed into what it was after 2004, 2005, and when they truly became a dynasty and things were really skyrocketing, and that was just the beginning. What I'm saying here is the Islanders are the early 2000s Patriots, where it's all about the depth. It's all about building situations where you know that if you have to rely on the fourth line, maybe not to get your goal, but to keep you in that game, not let the Bruins take everything over. That's what's going on with the Islanders. And that kind of reminds me of what happened in 2011 with the Bruins. Now that fourth line with Campbell and Thornton down low on that line, that was a pretty good fourth line. Now, a different time in the NHL. It wasn't, obviously, it's still not the 70s or 80s where you could beat the ever-living crap out of somebody. But still, it was a pretty good enforcer line that still had a tiny bit of skill. Not a lot, a little bit. But that's what they kind of remind me. The Islanders have a lot of depth. You don't have a bunch of superstars. So that has come back into play in this series, in my opinion, because in game 4 and 5, especially in that second period, the Islanders were forcing the Bruins into taking some dumb penalties. Now, we can argue if some of those penalties should have been called or not, or even if the referees should have even been calling those plays evenly, because there were some penalties that they called on the Bruins that you would turn around and they called the same thing, or sorry, that they called on the Bruins, and then you turn around and you'd see the Islanders commit the same penalties, the same infractions, and they didn't call a damn thing on the Islanders. So that was the frustrating part. That was the really frustrating part. But still, you got to give credit to that fourth line, the third line for the Islanders. That's really what's kept them in this series. That's what's helped them get to that lead. Now, obviously, the first line with Matt Barzal has really come alive, which is a shame for the Bruins because they weren't really, even though they made it to the second round, they weren't playing what they're capable of, and you were kind of hoping the Bruins were able to kind of shut them down and keep them at bay for the series, but they've woken up, and that's a scary situation for the Bruins. Now, I just touched on those refereeing moments, and it's been frustrating. Now, I'm not sitting here and being a Bruins homer and saying the Bruins have never committed a penalty, going to all Tommy Heinsohn. You gonna call that a hard foul? No, I'm not going in that direction. Trust me, not at all. But what I'm saying here is that if you're the referees, the linesmen, if you're going to call a cross-check on Sean Corrali late in the game, I saw that happen on occasions with the Islanders, or not just cross-checking, high sticking that wasn't called early on in the game. So if you're going to call that against the Bruins, call the same goddamn penalties against the Islanders. Have it an even playing surface. I know you don't want to have penalties in these situations decide a game in the playoffs. I know you don't want it to come down to a situation where it's like, well, you called the bad penalty on the Islanders or the Bruins or somebody late in the game that ends up costing a team a game where you should have been at full strength. But that's how it goes. If an infraction is committed, then you got to throw a penalty. Then you got to call a penalty. Just do it. That's what my issue was. That was what I was screaming about late on in that game. It just seemed like you're going to call everything on the Islanders. You're not going to call but you're not going to reciprocate that for the Bruins. Now, we know some people out there were crying that, well, Pasta got his cheap penalty, but yeah, it's still a penalty. But still, they called 4 others on the Islanders, and 3 of those cost the Bruins. Now, we can sit here and argue that if you get 4 penalties called on you, you have to actually buckle down and stop the Islanders' penalty. Have a good PK, good penalty kill. Don't allow 3 goals on 4 opportunities. You're not going to win many games if that happens. So I think that's the biggest thing tonight for the Bruins is that you have to keep cool heads. You can't take dumb penalties. Even though they switched out the refereeing crew today for the Bruins, you don't know how it's going to be called. So you hope that they're fair. You hope that they call a high stick. If they call a high stick on you, you hope that they see the same situation and they call a high stick on the Islanders, or cross checking, back checking, boarding, whatever it is, whatever the infraction is. You hope that they call the same on the Islanders. That's all I'm asking for as a Bruins fan. Be even. If you call one on me, make sure if the same situation pops up, you call it on them. Now, obviously, if the Islanders are out there and they've been the second least penalized team in the league, and if you don't commit an infraction, you don't commit a penalty, then I can live with that. I'm not asking to come up with phantom penalties over here. That's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking to be fair when you call penalties. That's all I want. But my other point about this whole situation is that if you're the Bruins, don't go out and give up 3 goals on the power play. That's the other part that pissed me off. I know you're down Carlo and I know you're down Miller, so I know it's harder for them. But still, to give up 3 power play goals on 4 opportunities, what are you doing? I can live with if you give up 1 on 4, because at least you're down. At least at that point, you still would have been ahead. Or even if you gave up 2, you're tied basically at that point. But you gave up 3 power play goals. That was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. That's the part that drove me bat shit crazy. That's the part that I just had so much trouble with. I get you're getting some bad calls, but still you have to go out there and kill the penalty. And Bruce Cassidy, who I love as a coach, he is probably the most forthcoming coach in the history of Boston sports. You might want to maybe you can throw in Terry Francona, but there were some times where he would obviously cover up for some of his players. He was a good players manager, but still he was pretty good at being forthcoming with the media. But Bruce Cassidy never hides anything, because if he says it to you, he said it to the player. And if he's okay with saying it to the player, and if they're okay with bringing it out to the media, Cassidy's not going to have a problem. And you know that the player's not going to have a problem because he didn't say anything it's not like he dragged him in the media and then all of a sudden decided to drag him publicly before he dragged him back in the locker room. So that part, I love him for that. And he's a good hockey coach. He's opened up this Bruins team to being a good scoring team, to being a modern NHL team. Because as much as Claude Julien is the all-time winning coach and he's one of the greatest coaches in the Bruins history, don't get me wrong, and he won a Stanley Cup playing his style, a defensive-minded team, Bruce Cassidy has allowed guys like David Pastrnak and Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand, who were good in their own right before Cassidy got there. And I know Pastrnak was drafted in 14 and really didn't come on until he was the year later, 2 years later. So he only got a couple of years of coaching, maybe a year and a half to 2 of Claude Julien. But still, he allows that front group. And obviously, all the lines down below, now you have Taylor Hall and Craig Smith and Krejci. He allows those lines to go out there and be creative. So I love Cassidy for all that. But if I'm being honest, the way he went in and attacked the post-game, I shouldn't say attack, but the way that he approached the post-game press conference had me a little bit kind of shaking my head from the standpoint that I get it. You're upset at the officials. You're upset at how that game went. Trust me, we all were. But just from what he said, it just didn't sit with me the right way. He just seemed like he was whining and asking for just kicking and screaming. He just seemed like that kid in elementary school that didn't get what he wanted. He's really upset, and he's trying to get his way, and he's just kicking and screaming and trying to get attention from the teacher, or again a child in the grocery store, just mommy, daddy, I want this toy, I want this cereal, or I want this, and you can see him in the store, and you're kind of looking off to the side, like, is anybody gonna do anything about this? Kind of just whining for attention type of thing. And like I said, I love Cassidy, but it just seemed like he was playing that up and just being a little too whiny in the post game. I could have done without some of it. No, obviously, I get it. You're sticking up for your players. That part, I'm fine with. I like when he sticks up for his players, but just the route that he went about it, I wasn't a big fan of. So I'll pull up those comments here for you, and I'll read those out for you. So this is the direct quote from the post-game press conference from Bruce Cassidy. Quote, I think what happens, and this is my take on it, is we're playing a team that is very respected management, coaching staff, Cassidy said. They won a Stanley Cup, but I think they sell a narrative over there that it's more like the New York Saints, not the New York Islanders. They play hard, they play the right way, but I feel we play the same way. That the exact calls that are getting called on us do not get called on them. And let me just stop it right there in the middle of that comment. We'll pick it back up in a second. That part of it, I mean, the New York Saints, that part did make me laugh. So I was fine with that part of it. I got a good chuckle out of that. And in the next part where he says they play hard, they play the right way, but I feel we play the same way, and the exact calls are getting called on us and not on us. So that's what I just preached. That's what I just, for the last 15, 20 minutes that I've been going over, that I thought the refs need to pay attention to. And hopefully the new refereeing crew that the NHL brought in, hopefully they are fair. Hopefully they call the same calls on the Islanders as the Bruins, and vice versa. So that, from that standpoint, I'm with Cassidy. So far, so good with Bruce. Now, this is where it starts to get into the land of, all right, you sound like you're whining. So jumping back in, these are very good officials. They're at this point in the season for a reason. Maybe we need to sell them more flop, but that's not us. You just hope they see them. The same calls go against us. It's not like I'm sitting there going, every call against us sucks. That's not true. And he goes on to say, it's just at the end of the day, the similar plays, they need to be penalized on those plays. But like I said, I think they've done a great job selling the narrative that they're clean. They play hard, a hard brand of hockey. I love the way they play, but they commit as many infractions as we do. Trust me. It's just a matter of them calling them. That's the part that I guess gets frustrating, but you play through it. And then he went on to say this kind of flows into the same situation with that, because they also brought up the whole Bergeron cheating on faceoffs. So this kind of goes into getting some of those calls. It's like with Bergeron today, he's thrown out of what? The first 2, 3, 4 faceoffs he takes, because someone mentioned, have a little respect for Patrice Bergeron, Cassidy said. He's up for the Selke. He's been a warrior in this league. Face of the franchise, does everything right for hockey, sells the game, and that's the way you treat him. I mean, come on, because someone speaks out and says something all of a sudden. They just need to do a better job than that. Just call the game that you see. Quit listening to those outside influences and get it done right. I don't think that they were great tonight. I'm not going to lie to you, but they have been. They're good officials. I know those two guys. They're good. They're good guys, good officials. I don't know. Tonight I just thought they were off. He can say the same about us, but that's what I thought. Let's just play hockey and call the infractions that happen, and we'll see guy how it goes. So as you can see there, Cassidy really upset with the officials and trying to kind of paint the Islanders into the good boys, the saints, the Catholic schoolboys over there that just don't do anything wrong. And of course, Barry Trotz comes out and he kind of backhandedly kind of says, "Oh, nothing's wrong." It's like, "Oh yeah, they're good. They're a good team." And I mean, Barry Trotz is a good hockey coach. I mean, you're going to be a little salty at times, but I mean, it is what it is between those guys, between Cassidy and Trotz. But still, I know they've had a rivalry when Trotz was in Washington, but still, it's frustrating just how Cassidy went about it, just from the standpoint that I get it, you're upset, you're trying to get more calls coming your way, but it just seemed like he was out there trying to plead, out there with his tin cup saying, "Please, sir, can you give us a break? Can you give us some penalties? I would really, really like to be on the power play, sir. Please give it to us." And of course, I just the way I usually take that is that it's whining, it's complaining, and you're trying just to get whatever you can, but it's not like you're doing this behind the scenes. And it's just something rubs me the wrong way when I see coaches or players just basically out there with the tin cup, just trying to beg for things. It's like, just go out there and play. Don't focus on it entirely. If you get a bad screw job like the New York, I was going to say, we're talking about the New York Saints with the Islanders, but if you're the New Orleans Saints back in 2018 with that egregious call that absolutely was a non-call that should never have been called, and that changed the entire course of that game where the Saints should have gone to the Super Bowl, and that was an absolute screw job, then go ahead, take $1 million fine for all I care from the league for criticizing the refs. But that in itself, if that happens, go out there and absolutely annihilate the referees. Give them the biggest load of crap that they can take. I'm fine with that. But the way in this particular case, there were some ones that they missed, but not entirely egregious. It's just more from the standpoint that they're not calling them on the Islanders. And I just wasn't happy with how he tried to go about that whole situation. But the other thing that popped up during this game that also had my blood boiling, or had my brain racing, I should say, was the injury, it wasn't officially an injury. It was, quote unquote, a maintenance thing from Cassidy. That was his quote. It's a maintenance thing with why they took him out in the third period. When Tuukka got pulled, I wasn't entirely surprised that he was pulled per se. I thought it might start to happen because I know there've been some rumblings about the injury. And he didn't. Well, there was the first story that he didn't go to pregame skate on the game, the evening or the eve of Game 4, I should say. But then things came out that he went to a early morning workout with the team, so he didn't end up going to that. They won before Game 4, so a little ticky-tack there. But still, there are a lot of rumors flying out there that Tuukka's still dealing with that back, but nothing official. So I wasn't entirely surprised that he was pulled from the beginning of the third period. And Swayman went in, and of course, the first shot that he sees, it goes in. I mean, it was a tough shot. It was a point-blank shot. So I'm not ripping him for that. He only faced 4 more shots, so it wasn't all that stressful for him because the Bruins, after a horrible second period, came out and controlled the whole third period, basically, and almost came back, almost did, but it was that backbreaker there that Swayman ended up giving up on his very first shot, that if that doesn't go in, then this game's going to overtime. At least as long as everything else played out the same way, it's going to overtime. So from that standpoint, I was kind of hoping that Swayman got the start tonight. Yeah, let me explain it, because if you've been listening to the podcast, you know I am a Tuukka supporter. I've always been behind Tuukka. I think Tuukka gets way too much flack in this town, in this region, for unneeded reasons. That he doesn't come up big. He doesn't steal a big game, which is not true. How do you get to 2 Stanley Cup finals? You can't just breeze through rounds 1 through 3, and you're not going to win every game 7-0, 4-0 every time. He came up big against the Pittsburgh Penguins back in 2016. That whole series shut them down in a 4-game sweep. Now everybody wants to point towards Game 7 of the 2019 Stanley Cup final against the St. Louis Blues. But that was more of a meltdown from the entire team, not Tuukka himself. How do you get to the Stanley Cup final? You have to be really good. You can't be a shitty goalie to get to the Stanley Cup finals. You have to be good. That's the point blank reason right there. You can't be a shitty goaltender. You have to be a good one to get to the Stanley Cup finals. So to me, it's a really, really shitty way for fans to take out their anger on Tuukka. I get it. He hasn't won a cup, but to say he hasn't won big games is just wrong. It's idiotic. It's stupid. He's won big games. He's played really well in the playoffs. Now I'll grant you that 2013 Stanley Cup final run, not the run, but the Stanley Cup final itself against the Blackhawks. That wasn't his finest moment, but still, they made it to Game 6, almost to Game 7. But that Blackhawks team is the closest thing we've seen to a dynasty in this last decade. So they won, because that team won 3 Stanley Cups. So that was the middle cup that they beat the Bruins in. So that was a great team. I mean, Patrick Kane, Sharp, and Taves. I mean, that line, that group is really good. So I'm not going to fault Tuukka for that. Again, it wasn't his finest hour, but still, great team, really good team. Now, 2019 Stanley Cup final, the very final game, like I said, I'm not going to fault him for that either. So my point here, though, is even though I've backed Tuukka all this time, even though I've had his back, I just think he's not healthy right now. Now, I know everybody in the NHL during the playoffs, you want that cup so bad. You've seen guys out there a la Gregory Campbell, on a broken leg, literally broken leg after diving down to block a shot. He was out there for 1 minute and 30 seconds, I believe it was, in a playoff game, on a shift in a playoff game, because he wanted the cup so bad. So you know how bad these players want it. The stories are legendary. Patrice Bergeron in that 2013 Stanley Cup run played with a punctured lung against the Blackhawks, for crying out loud. I mean, that's how bad this team was. Zdeno Chara in 2019 broke his jaw, had it wired shut, had that college face mask, that plastic face mask by the jaw, so that nothing hits it, or at least nothing hits it really bad, playing with a wired jaw in the Stanley Cup finals. So, of course, all these NHL players want it really bad and they're going to play hurt. But for me, it's different between being a forward and a defenseman if you're going to play hurt. I know it's not easy to play hurt, but my point is it's easier for a forward or defenseman to play out there being hurt because you're not out there until the action comes your way. Like when you're a goaltender, you're out there moving around the whole time. It's easier to hide things. You have to keep on moving. When you're a goaltender out there, especially with a back, if that's truly what it is, which we know he had that in the regular season, and you know that's going to stiffen up on him. And if he's really having bad issues with his back, if it's that bad, and it's going to cause him to miss time anyways, I don't want him to be 75, 70%, 60% of what Tuukka should be when you have a good young goaltender who's the future of this team. Now, I know, granted, he hasn't played besides that last 20 minutes of game 3. If 20 minutes of the third period of game 5 of this round in the playoffs, but still, you have to start somewhere. And he's shown in the regular season, albeit regular season, still he's good. He's an NHL quality goaltender, not just a starter. He'll be an all-star. He'll have a chance to be even more than that. I think he's that good, but obviously he's young now, so he's untested and you don't know really what you have, but still, I would rather put somebody that's healthy in the net tonight to try to get you back to Boston. And then maybe Tuukka by that time has healed up enough where you get back to 80%, 90% of what Tuukka is. And maybe his back's not stiffening up. Of course, when you're down there, and I believe game 4, not game 4, but earlier in the game, in that first period, those first couple periods before things started going haywire, midway through the second, he only had faced 16, 18 shots. So, of course, when you're down there by the opposite end and nothing's happening and your team is pretty much controlling the pace of this game, at least in the first period, third period, your back is going to stiffen up. It's going to tighten up. So if you're not going to be 100%, I want Swayman. This is the Sway. This is the Sway tonight. It should have been Swayman. Point blank. Should have been it. Shouldn't have been it. Should have been in net. It's really, really tough though for me to say that from the standpoint that, of course, I love Tuukka. I really do. And if Tuukka is healthy, this isn't a conversation. As much as I love Swayman, as much as I think he's going to be the successor to Tuukka, and it should be a pretty seamless transition, I would not want to roll the dice if Tuukka was healthy, though, on Swayman. So this has nothing to do with me questioning the talent, because I know there are a lot of people out there that like to question the talent of Tuukka Rask. Not the case. Not the case at all. In this case, it's more the health of Tuukka, and I just don't think he's 100% healthy. I don't even think he's 75% healthy. I pray that I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong tonight. I hope that Tuukka comes out there and plays his ass off, and we see the old Tuukka Rask out there standing on his head, and the Bruins win. And I think the Bruins are going to end up winning tonight. I think they will, even though Tuukka is not 100%. I still think this Bruins team is motivated from what happened in game 5. And this team always has a history of playing well as the playoffs go and they have their back up against the wall. 2013 against the Leafs. You can pick at whatever series you want against the Toronto Maple Leafs over the last 7 seasons, 7-8 years. And of course, they've always played well against Toronto. They've played well against you pick the team, Carolina, whoever it's been when they've had to to have their back up against the wall. They played really well, really, really well. So in that part, I trust them. They have good leadership in Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci. So that team is got a lot of veterans there, and even Charlie McAvoy at this point, who's young, but he's been in these runs over the last 4 years since he's come up and been a full-time defenseman and learning under Chara. So even that young veteran experience that at this point to help out those young guys that are on this team, or even some of those veterans like a Taylor Hall who hasn't had a lot of opportunities because he's played on some bad teams, just to help them out. So I know they have good leadership. That's not my concern. So I think they're going to be motivated enough. And I think Tuukka is just going to be able to eke this one out. It's going to be tough for him. I think you're going to see a few wobbly saves out there where you're used to seeing Tuukka be a little bit more smooth on some of these saves, or they're going to be maybe a couple deflections that you're going to hold your breath on there tonight with Tuukka. But I think in the end, the Bruins end up winning this game, send it back to the Boston Garden on Friday night. And I think this time they're able to pull this one out at home against the New York Islanders. Excuse me, sorry. Against the New York Islanders on Friday night when they play that 7th and deciding game. So as much hand-wringing as there has been over the last 2 days, and as much hand-wringing as I've done over this podcast about the Bruins, I think they end up pulling this series out. I think they end up winning this series. There's going to be some tense moments just because the Islanders are so good. They're a gritty, grindy team that is so deep in those 4 lines that they just don't give up no matter what the situation is. They played so well when the Bruins were just coming at them in the first period and third period. They didn't end up giving up the tying goal in that third period. So you know they're built strong and they're built tough. So I do like the effort that they bring in this game. This series is gonna go right down to the wire, going to go to Game 7. But the Bruins, in my opinion, they're going to end up winning this series, and they'll end up moving on to face the Tampa Bay Lightning. I believe that's what I think is going to happen. Now, if that does happen, we'll end up breaking that down for you. Not, like I said, I'm not going to put the cart before the horse here and break down Tampa Bay just yet, because this is a long, long way from over, because obviously if they lose tonight, season's done, no more Bruins, and we'll all be depressed until next winter rolls around and the Bruins have to get at this again. And there'll be a lot of things that have to happen in the offseason, i.e. bringing back Taylor Hall, Krejci, Tuukka, what they want to do. But we got a lot to put on the plate here tonight for the Bruins, so we'll leave it at that for the Bruins as we hope and we pray that they're able to pull this one out here on the road in enemy territory against a really good team in the Islanders. And another really good team over the last 20 years was in the news, at least over the last couple of weeks, even longer, as they were rumored to be in the race for Julio Jones. Now, as you all know from the last couple shows, I love me some Julio. I wanted Julio bad on the Patriots. I was pounding the table for Julio. And like I told you, I hoped that by the next time this podcast came on air, that Julio Jones was going to be wearing a Patriots uniform. Now, sadly, that's not the case, and Julio was traded to the Tennessee Titans. So that goes to another AFC opponent that the Patriots are chasing. At least he didn't go into the division, but still, it's another AFC opponent that if the Patriots end up bouncing back, if I've heard a lot about Jarrett Stidham here lately, so it's got a lot of Jarrett Stidham on the brain. If Mac Jones can prove that he can be the starter and overtake Newton, which that's not going to take much, as we all saw last year. So if Newton just falls flat on his face like he did last year, then Mac Jones, who the reports have said he's been really good. He's been out as far as not been physically out there throwing 80-yard bombs or anything, but mentally the team has been very impressed with what he's brought to the table. Very quick learners, picked up the playbook well. I mean, it's helped that his coach in college was Nick Saban, so that's a plus for you. So obviously that's always going to be on your side when it comes to playing with the Patriots and playing for Belichick. But still, I really wanted Julio Jones to be on this Patriots team to try to help Mac Jones and this Patriots team just elevate. And I think if you had Julio Jones, even with an unknown in the quarterback group, then you would have been actual division contenders at that point. You would have been back to being in the mix in the AFC East for the division race. Because right now I think they're in the mix for a wild card spot. But if you got Julio, I think you would have been in the mix for the division and in the mix for one of those top 3-4 seeds in the AFC. Going 1 or 2, obviously, is going to be a long stretch. That's still Kansas City's running away with number 1. Buffalo is going to be right there for the number 2 seed. Tennessee right there as well. So you have some good competition. Baltimore, throw in the Browns. So, of course, all of those teams are going to be right there. So it's a crowded field in the AFC. But my point being is that I wanted them to get Julio Jones. And the frustrating part about this whole situation is he got traded for a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. Now, of course, the cap hit is $15 million with the Patriots. It's $4 more million than I thought was going to be the cap hit. I thought it was going to be $11 million from all the early reports, but still. It would have left the Patriots $1 million to play with, and we know the cap is crap. You know they can manipulate it. That's always been the rumor, but it really is true. You see teams all the time just move things around, and they end up getting the situation that they want to be. They end up finding $5 million here or there so that they can end up filling a couple holes as things go along. So you know that even if they brought him in, they might have tried to renegotiate with him. Who knows? But my point being is that, yeah, with a high cap hit, I still would have taken it. You still had room for it. You still would have been in the positive on your cap situation. But still, this was so frustrating from the standpoint that you gave up only a second and a fourth. The Patriots have pissed away their second-round picks here in the last 5 years. Now, things are still to be written about Kyle Duggar, who I actually liked. So maybe we'll put an asterisk on Kyle Duggar. And obviously, Christian Barmore, we don't know. Christian Barmore could be a steal in that second round. He was supposed to be a first-round pick. So if he lives up to that first-round potential, then the last 2 years might have been actually not throwing away the pick. But my point being, if you set those two aside, the second round has been a graveyard for Belichick. Outside of Rob Gronkowski, let's put it at 2010, in the more modern portion of the dynasty. We'll do Gronk, BC Gronk, AD Gronk. So in the AD Gronk era, i.e. 2010, when he was drafted, Gronk was a second-round pick, took a chance on, really good. And Jamie Collins, second-round pick, was a pretty good player, pretty good decision. Obviously not the level of Gronk, where Gronk is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, the best tight end of all time. But still, the point being, this team has absolutely thrown away their second-round picks the last 5-6 years. Like I said, just throw away these last couple of years because we don't know. Put those to the side because we don't know what they're going to turn out to be. They could be good. They could be back on track. But the point being is, are you going to spend it on another Razai Dowling, another Duke Dawson in the corner from Alabama who's escaping me, Cyrus Jones? Is it going to be another one of those situations? where you just get some bad second round picks? If that's the case, I'll trade you 2. In that case, to get a Hall of Famer. Yes, he's 32, but you know how I feel. He's still got plenty left in that tank. I'll take Julio all day long. So take a 2, take a 4th. I'll trade that draft capital. And to the morons out there that were jumping up and down saying that it would have been bad to bring in Julio because you already signed these 2 tight ends. There's going to be too many mouths to feed. This is just not how the Patriots are built. You know that there has to be, depending on the type of sets that you run, even if you had 2 tight ends out there, you're still going to have room for at least 2 more wide receivers, because that running back, or if you don't have a running back, you could stick a 3rd in there. Or if you have 1 tight end, 4 wide receivers. No matter what your set is, you're still, unless you're going 3 tight end heavy and having 1 wide receiver out there, the chance are you're going to have at least 2 wide receivers out there. So there's going to be plenty of room out there. There's going to be plenty of food going around. Plenty of footballs going around for Julio Jones. And to those that were saying that he's not a fit for their scheme, for what they want to do, Julio Jones is arguably the best all-around receiver in football. I would say that he's the best all-around receiver. At least he was these last 10 years in football. He's fast. They call him Julio the Jet Jones. And then you have him good at running routes. Now, is he a tactician where he's like the absolute best route runner of all time? No. And I've heard people call him, he's just a big physical body that you throw the football up to and he just goes up and catches it. He doesn't do a lot else. I'm like, that's not the case either. He can do everything. He might not be able to like everything at the very, very best. Is he number 1 at it? No, but he's probably still top 5 at it. Worst top 10 at route running, catching traffic, whatever you want to throw out there. He's still damn good. So he would fit any scheme. Hell, he played in Alabama for Nick Saban. I know he hasn't been there since 2008 through 2011 before he got drafted, but still, it's Julio friggin' Jones, Hall of Famer. He's going to fit into the scheme. You had numbnuts. Even guys like Matt Chatham, who was a special team linebacker, was saying, no, this wouldn't be a fit. He's like, there's too many mouths to feed. He just went over it, and it made me want to throw up. Dude, it's Julio Jones. All the Patriots media cartel out there that were just after this, they didn't trade for him, were like, no, it's not a fit. It's just when it worked out here. Shut up. You know you would have been out there saying the opposite things if they traded for Julio. Ooh, they would have had their Patriots little pajamas and everything out, and they would have been drawing all night on these playbooks that like, ooh, we can put Julio here. We can do this with him. Ooh, we can do that as well. Oh, yeah. Oh, we got these 2 tight ends as well. Oh, and then Julio's going to be out wide. We can put him in motion. He can do all these. Oh, this is going to be so exciting with Julio. Shut up, because you would have been saying both. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth on the topic. At least I'm taking a damn stance on this. I wanted Julio from the start. Yeah, he would have been a fit perfectly. It was just frustrating just to see that they decided to not go after Julio and give up that capital, because I would have been fine with the cap hit as well. Now we'll quickly just brush over the Red Sox here as we're getting close to game time for the Bruins, as the Red Sox did sweep the New York Yankees over the weekend, taking all 3 games in the Bronx. It was the first time they swept the Yankees in a series in Yankee Stadium since 2011. And as we mentioned earlier, the Red Sox have just had bad luck with the Yankees these last couple of years, or it shouldn't be luck. It's just they've had bad teams, so they've gotten pounded by the Yankees. But the Yankees, even though they're still in the mix for the division and a wild card, they started off not so great. Then they won a bunch of games here over the last month. their pitching was really what kept them in it because their hitting is god-awful. And after seeing them play live and seeing how things went, man, everything was just bad. That I don't know how that lineup even managed to scratch across one run, let alone how they scratched across. It was 4 or 5 on Sunday night. Man, that was eye-opening in its own because it's pretty much Aaron Judge. And I know Stanton just came back, but even DJ LeMahieu, who was a batting champion last year and the year before, he doesn't look the same. That Yankees team is all out of sorts. So I'm not impressed with that team. Their pitching was, it was okay, but still, to beat the Yankees 3 straight, it's just that made my weekend. I'm not going to lie. As bad as the Bruins played on Monday, that was over the weekend on Saturday. At least seeing the Red Sox beat the Yankees, that was nice. So things looked pretty good over the weekend, and as you mentioned, they had that delayed sweep of the Marlins, so things were pretty good. But the bullpen is probably the biggest surprise. And as you probably have known from just following me here, just how the bullpen was up and down besides Matt Barnes was the biggest thing that was happening with this team. That was going to be the one area where it could sink this team. Now I know everybody wants to bring up the bottom part of the order, which that's so stupid. It's like, what lineup in baseball? Name me a lineup in baseball since the 27 Yankees or whatever Hall of Fame team that's had 9 guys, or even the 2004 Red Sox who had a batting champion in the 9-hole. But for the most part, what lineup has more than 5 guys in a lineup that keep them afloat? No shit, you're going to struggle probably in that 6 through the 9-hole or 7 through the 9-hole. Of course, you're going to run into problems. You stupid. Of course you're going to not everybody's going to have good days all the time. So of course, if JD, Rafael Devers, and Xander Bogaerts have some off nights, of course you're going to struggle, but every team's going to struggle. You can go out to LA. I know the Dodgers have a pretty good lineup out there after trading for Mookie Betts. You have Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager, Justin Turner. They had to pick up Albert Pujols, and you got Max Muncy, but still, the middle of that order struggles. I don't care how the rest of the bottom of the lineup, even if it's some all-stars, if you have to fill in or they're struggling, guess what? They're going to struggle. The bottom of the order probably still sucks at some point. Not every team is going to have. Tell me how many teams in baseball have a 1 through 9 that you're like, yep, they're gonna every night. Gonna be great. So that part just pissed me off. Sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but it irritates me. But the bullpen has been pretty good as far as Adam Ottavino and Josh Taylor. Both of them have come in the last 10 appearances, have just been absolutely lights out. And I know earlier in May, I wasn't, like in the middle of May, I wasn't as happy with Ottavino as what I expected coming into this year. He was one of the better relievers in baseball. He was a former closer. He was one of those guys where you could hand it in the 8th and you thought he had shut it down. He had some shaky appearances, but now he's just been absolute nails. Even in a game in the middle of some rain against the Marlins, he came in and still closed the door. And this week in New York, he looked filthy. Same with Josh Taylor. He came into a big situation against Aaron Judge with the tying run on. He struck him out, showed some emotion. So he's pitched pretty well. So I'm really happy with what the Red Sox bullpen has kind of rounded into. Now, I still would like to see them get another arm in there because I'm not going to rely on Philip Valdez this whole year or Matt Andriese. Those guys I'm not as happy with, but the rest of the bullpen I'm definitely happy with. So I'll take it, and I'm happy with what's going on. The Red Sox have to play the Houston Astros here, so that's going to be another tough series as they only won 1 of the 4 games in Houston. They've already dropped 1 in this series against Houston so far, so we'll see how it goes. But again, they played well against good competition, which I'm glad to see. This team is not a fluke. They're going to be in it the long haul. I still think they're going to challenge the Rays for the division and ultimately win it. But I've really liked what I've seen out of the bullpen lately. And like I said, the Hunter Renfroe has kind of actually lengthened the lineup. So, yeah. So stick it, people out there that say the bottom of the lineup is actually a problem. He's lengthened it out. So this is a Red Sox team again. Hey, just keep chugging along. Then next week, when we're back to our normal time, well, obviously, unless the Bruins end up moving on, which, as I said earlier, I predict they will, and depending on game times, we'll be back next Wednesday, same time, or usual time, I should say, at 8 o'clock. And before we go, just want to put it out there that I did start the New England Sports Weekly Twitter handle. It's under NE Sports Weekly. So it's the letter N, letter E, and then it's all spelled out, Sports Weekly. So just search at New England Sports Weekly on Twitter, and that account is up. So you can always hit me up on that account. Like I said, before the show, after the show, with any questions, we can bring it up during next week's show, or if you get me before the show happens, I'll bring that live onto the show. Always hit me up in the chat. As you can see right there, if you want to hit my personal Twitter or Instagram handle, it's at Sean_Met28. And again, if you want to hit the new show Twitter and obviously like it and follow it as well, we'll try to tweet out from that as well. We'll follow that one at NE Sports Weekly on Twitter. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it. We'll see you next week at 8 o'clock for the regular scheduled program. And let's pray and cross your fingers that the Bruins win tonight. Go Bees!